Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world of powdered wigs, flickering chandeliers, and pineapples. Yes, really. You ease your way into a golden salon somewhere in 18th century France, where conversation swirls around not politics or poetry, but fruit. Not just any fruit, though. This is the fruit. A rare, golden, thorny crown that smells like sunshine and sugar and conquest. You're not allowed to touch it, of course. It sits under a glass dome, like a holy relic. You catch yourself staring too long. One noblewoman leans in and whispers, "That one came all the way from Saint-Domingue. 42 days at sea. It hasn't even bruised." She fans herself delicately, as if the pineapple's aura is simply too intense to withstand. This is not a world built for survival. Not yours, anyway. You probably won't last long here, not without blistering from the wigs or choking on the perfume. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive late to the salon. Of course you do. That's half the point. Being seen arriving is part of the performance. You shuffle past towering floral arrangements and trays of pastel-colored pastries, trying not to trip over a decorative dog in a velvet ribbon. The room hums with the kind of energy that only idle wealth can generate. Nobles in lace cravats and towering wigs sip cordial and discuss things with the kind of casual detachment that only comes from having absolutely nothing urgent to do. You hear laughter that doesn't quite reach the eyes. Someone just made a pun about a pineapple. You didn't catch it, but everyone chuckled politely. At the center of the room, under a domed glass case on a mirrored plinth, sits the star of the evening. A pineapple. Fresh, intact, its skin golden and green, its leaves still perky with defiant tropical flair. It's not to be touched, much less eaten. It's simply there to be admired. You lean in. The scent is, surprisingly, earthy, with a sweetness so rich it smells almost fake. Like a candy factory left out in the sun. No one here has ever been to the Caribbean. Many haven't even been to Marseille. But that pineapple represents 1,000 miles of heat, labor, and saltwater. It's a prize, a whisper of empire, and a wildly impractical one. You try to imagine explaining this to someone in the future. That an 18th century French noble might spend the equivalent of a small house just to have a pineapple sit in a dining room for a week, and then pass it off to the next party, as if it were a very fragrant baton in an extremely posh relay race. Historians still argue whether these displays were more about status than genuine fascination. Maybe it was both. After all, pineapples didn't just taste good, they looked like they should mean something. Their skin resembled armor, their crown looked like royalty, and their flavor? Well, no one in the room really knew what it tasted like. Most had never actually eaten one. It didn't matter. The pineapple had become a symbol of colonial reach, of domestic ingenuity, of botanical daring, and, above all, of wealth that was so secure, you could afford to spend it on something completely useless. You move through the room. A group of younger nobles are debating whether the pineapple on display is real or a clever wax replica. One claims to have smelled it. Another insists it's the same one she saw 3 weeks ago at a different salon. They squint, they sniff, one even pokes at the glass. No one suggests eating it. It's not that kind of fruit anymore. Nearby, a man in crimson silk is holding court. He's telling a story, loudly, about a cousin who tried to grow pineapples in his country estate in Normandy. He imported glass for a hothouse, hired a Dutch gardener, and ended up with a single shriveled fruit that tasted like vinegar and despair. Everyone laughs, but you sense a trace of envy. At least the cousin tried. There's a new arrival. A servant in livery enters with great ceremony, holding a silver tray. On it, another pineapple. This one's a bit more yellow, a bit more fragrant, perhaps a touch more smug. The guests coo. A small argument breaks out about which of the two is more elegant. Not riper, not tastier, just more aesthetically aligned with the season's mood. A woman in green satin compares it to her upholstery. She's not joking. You edge away, overwhelmed. In the corner, near a half-draped harpsichord, sits an older man swirling a cordial glass. His voice is dry as he mutters to no one in particular. We used to talk about literature. Then we talked about court politics. Now we talk about pineapples. You wonder if he's bitter, or just bored. You suspect the latter. A footman walks by, and the old man waves him down. Bring me something less exotic, he says. A pear. A very dull pear. The footman nods with the practiced politeness of someone who once had to find a golden fork specifically for pineapple display. Twice in one night. And as the candlelight flickers, you realize, this isn't really about fruit. It's about performance. About scarcity. About turning the world upside down just to show you can. The pineapple sits under its dome, oblivious to the whispers, the envy, the longing. Tomorrow, it'll travel to another mansion, another room, another salon where someone will marvel. Can you believe it? It's a real pineapple, and no one will dare eat it. You follow the pineapple. Not literally, it's not going anywhere tonight, but your mind drifts backward along its improbable path. From the cool hush of the salon to the heat that birthed it. Back through dockyards, crates, and sweating customs officials. Back across the choppy Atlantic, where salt air bruises the skin and barrels of sugar leak syrup in the hull. You are now somewhere in the Caribbean. Let's say Saint-Domingue, because most French pineapples came from there. It's hot, oppressively so. The kind of heat that clings to your clothes and makes you regret every ounce of fabric. Around you, the landscape throbs with color. Banana trees, sugarcane fields, and those unmistakable spikes of pineapple tops rising like tiny green crowns from the red earth. Harvesting pineapples isn't easy. You duck to avoid sharp leaves, swat at mosquitoes the size of sugar tongs, and nearly trip over a cluster of low-growing fruit. Each one has taken a full year to grow, and some are still too small to be worth shipping. A few are overripe, sticky and swarming with flies. But somewhere among them is the one. The perfect fruit. Golden skin. Heavy with juice. That intoxicating smell already curling into the air. It's plucked by careful hands, often enslaved hands, though the plantation owner doesn't mention that when he brags about his exports. The pineapple is wiped gently, as if prepping it for a royal portrait. Then it's wrapped in soft leaves, nestled into straw, and boxed for a journey it may not survive. Historians still argue whether pineapples were shipped live with the crown intact or sliced and reassembled for presentation. There's even a theory, marginal, but weirdly charming, that some noble households in France tried to reconstruct pineapples from pieces, like edible taxidermy. Either way, your pineapple begins its voyage. From tropical plantation to colonial port. Then across the Atlantic, wedged between barrels of indigo and bundles of coffee beans. It's not traveling first class, or even second. More like, please don't roll off the shelf during a storm, class. You picture the ship, creaky, stinking, swaying like a drunk on cobblestones. Sailors curse the fruit when it starts to rot halfway through the voyage. A few decide to eat one, just one, and immediately regret it. It's not ripe, it's not sweet, and it bites back with a sour sting. Back in France, word arrives that a pineapple shipment is due in Le Havre. And just like that, the buzz begins. Couriers ride ahead with news. Cooks sharpen their knives in anticipation, though most won't get to use them. Wealthy households send buyers, valets, and even distant cousins to jostle for the prize. You'd think they were awaiting a royal visit, not a spiky fruit with a questionable shelf life. You arrive at the docks just as the ship is unloading. The air smells of brine, sweat, and damp wood. Sailors yell over one another, crates creak open, and someone's already haggling over a shipment of rum. There, beneath a layer of straw, is your pineapple. Slightly bruised on one side, but still impressive. Someone gasps. You can't tell if it's admiration or mild sunstroke. It's packed again, this time more elegantly. Placed in a custom box lined with velvet. And then whisked away toward Paris, toward glory. You ride with it. Sort of. You're wedged between a sack of cocoa and an impatient courier who smells like cloves and unwashed linen. He mumbles that this fruit is for the Marquis de Louvois. Last year, the Marquis's pineapple collapsed before dinner and was replaced with a painted turnip. This year, he's not taking chances. By the time you reach Versailles, you're half asleep and fully disheveled. But the pineapple? It's radiant. Like it somehow gathered more glamour with each passing village. The Marquis receives it with solemn gratitude, as if presented with an exotic pet. He holds it aloft. His wife claps. The gardener in the corner quietly calculates the odds of keeping it alive for one more day without refrigeration or hope. It's placed, once again, under glass. Lit from beneath by a ring of discreetly hidden candles. A pineapple spotlight, if you will. Just in time for tonight's gathering. One noble whispers, "I heard it came from Jamaica." Another sniffs. "Please. That's British territory. It's obviously French-grown." The debate heats up. No one mentions that pineapples don't really care about national borders. In the corner, a gentleman with ink-stained fingers and a thick notebook takes notes. He's writing an essay on pineapple economics. You peek over his shoulder. The price of prestige, botanical imports and the fragility of French excess. Catchy. He murmurs something about colonial markets, perishable symbols, and the fragility of fame. You suspect he's not invited back often. Later that night, you're alone in the salon. Everyone's gone to bed or off to other parties. You lean in close to the pineapple. It's sweating slightly in the heat of the candles. You think, just for a second, of poking it. Maybe slicing off one tiny bite. But you don't. No one ever does. You wake up, still in 18th century France, still following the pineapple, and still faintly wondering how a fruit ended up as a social climbing device. It's morning now. Sunlight dapples through heavy velvet curtains. Somewhere in the chateau, someone is tuning a harp. Someone else is yawning into a powdered wig. And the pineapple? Still sitting there, dignified under glass, like a visiting dignitary who's not quite sure why they were invited. You wander down to breakfast, hoping for coffee, maybe a croissant, and a quiet moment to process this fruity fever dream. But even here, the pineapple lingers in conversation. One noblewoman recounts how her cousin's household borrowed a pineapple last month just to display it at a dinner party. Not to eat. To borrow. There was a rental fee. It came with a velvet pillow. This is your first real glimpse into how pineapples function as status symbols in France. They're not food. They're decoration. You don't bite them, you brag about them. You use them to imply that you know people with ships, land in the colonies, and taste. All without saying a word. Historians still argue whether the French elite genuinely enjoyed the taste of pineapple, or if the mystique lay entirely in the rarity. Some contemporary accounts describe the flavor as aggressive, exotic, or sharp as sunlight. Others compared it to perfume or wax. So, interpret that however you'd like. You walk through the gardens now. There's a group of nobles gathered under a linden tree, deep in discussion. The topic? Whether growing a pineapple domestically is possible. Spoiler, it kind of is. But it requires a heated greenhouse, constant supervision, and the kind of budget usually reserved for minor wars. These greenhouses, known as pineries, start cropping up on aristocratic estates during the mid-1700s. The earliest versions are elaborate glass houses with coal-heated flues that snake under the soil. They smell faintly of ash, citrus, and crushed ambition. You pause by one now, peering through the misty glass. Inside, rows of short, spiky plants. Some in bloom. Others stubbornly refusing to grow. A gardener fusses with one that's turned slightly brown on top. He sighs like a man who's seen too many pineapple tragedies. You don't enter. Pineries are delicate ecosystems. And also, the gardener looks like he'll chase you with a rake. Back in the chateau, it's time for a mid-morning gossip session disguised as a poetry reading. Someone has written a sonnet about the pineapple's tragic loneliness. You're not sure if it's satire. No one laughs. It's whispered that Madame de Pompadour once had an entire room filled with wax pineapples. That may or may not be true. But what is true is that faux pineapples, made of porcelain, glass, even papier-mâché, start to circulate at court. Because not everyone can afford the real thing, but everyone wants to look like they can. At some point, your host explains the rules of pineapple etiquette. You nod politely, even though none of this makes any sense in the real world. Rule 1. Never bring your own pineapple to someone else's home. It's like bringing a crown to someone else's coronation. Rule 2. If you're served pineapple at dinner, pretend you've had it before, even if you haven't. Look bored, maybe a little jaded. You don't want to seem too impressed by something that costs more than a year's rent. Rule 3. Do not, under any circumstances, bite into it like an apple. Apparently, a Swedish diplomat did this once and was never invited back. That night, at yet another banquet, the pineapple finally makes an appearance beyond its glass case. It is not, as you might hope, diced into a fruit salad or laid atop a cake. Instead, it's placed on the table as a centerpiece, again, surrounded by gilded cutlery, candied violets, and 6 very confused lobsters. Everyone nods in appreciation. Someone toasts to tropical gifts. No one touches the fruit. You lean over to the woman seated beside you, whispering, "So, are we ever going to eat it?" She gives you a scandalized look. "Eat it," she hisses. "That would be wasteful." You sit back in your chair, chastened, and deeply amused. Historians still debate whether most pineapples brought to France were ever consumed. Some say they rotted in place, day by day, until they collapsed into sad little puddles of fermented syrup. Others believe they were discreetly eaten behind closed doors, sliced thin, shared among a dozen people, and accompanied by elaborate sighs. But here's the strangest thing. No one seems to mind that they're not eating it. The pineapple exists for what it represents. It's the ultimate visual flex. Proof that you are connected, exotic, and fabulously out of touch with economic reality. By the time dessert arrives, actual dessert, nothing with pineapple of course, you realize that this single fruit has accomplished something extraordinary. It has upstaged every guest. And it hasn't said a word. You're still sitting at that endless banquet table, trying not to stare too hard at the pineapple centerpiece like it might suddenly announce the dessert course itself. The flicker of candlelight plays off its golden skin, casting long shadows on the white linen tablecloth. A string quartet in the corner has drifted into something baroque and vaguely melancholy. Appropriate, given that the fruit of the hour continues to sit untouched, as though it's more guest of honor than edible object. But now your focus shifts, not to the pineapple itself, but to the people watching it. Their expressions vary. Some look bored, as if they've seen too many pineapples this season. Others sneak glances at it, the way one might glance at an expensive jewel. One powdered gentleman nearby leans over to casually mention that his cousin in Nantes owns 3 pineapple plants. Not pineapples. Plants. Which is apparently a far bigger deal. You begin to sense the real story here, not just a fascination with a fruit, but a full-blown obsession with being seen in proximity to it. So you backtrack in your mind a little, because you're starting to wonder, how did a bunch of aristocrats who wouldn't know a compost pile from a chamber pot become competitive pineapple horticulturists? Well, here's how. Growing pineapples in France in the 1700s is like trying to raise flamingos in the Alps. They require intense heat, consistent humidity, and precisely timed watering. And this is before the invention of thermostats, or reliable greenhouses, or, let's be honest, any noble with calluses. But suddenly, it becomes the thing to do. You're in your carriage now, riding along a tree-lined drive to visit one such estate. The Marquis de Segur, tall, vain, and inexplicably wearing gloves indoors, has recently completed his pineapple theater. Not a stage. A glass structure built solely to grow and exhibit pineapples. It's got columns. It's got sculptures. It even has a guest book. He greets you at the door like a museum curator. "Would you like the grand tour?" he asks, already assuming your answer is yes. You step inside. The humidity hits first, like stepping into a warm citrus bath. Then the smell, earthy, sharp, slightly sour, like overripe apples and steam. Lining the tiled floor are rows of pineapples at varying stages of growth. Each sits in its own terracotta pot, labeled with a handwritten name and date. They're treated more like prize dogs than plants. Do you name them? You ask, trying to sound casual. Of course, he replies. That one's Delphine. She's temperamental. Requires music. And you think, right? Totally normal. Nothing unhinged here at all. Historians still argue whether these noble-grown pineapples ever made it to maturity. Some letters describe full harvests. Others imply the fruit was purchased abroad and planted posthumously, just for the prestige of a photo-op. Except, before cameras. A painted pineapple counts as proof. But here's the catch. If you could actually grow your own pineapple, it meant something more than wealth. It meant patience. Control. A connection, however artificial, to the mysterious colonies where these fruits originated. You pause now at a small table inside the pinery, set for tea. Of course it's not just tea. There are pamphlets laid out here describing pineapple watering rotations. One guest flips through a page that details how to mulch with sheep's wool. Another recommends speaking to the plants once a day. Keeps their spirits up, she says, with complete sincerity. Someone asks if the pineapples dream of returning to the Caribbean. The table laughs politely, and you're not entirely sure if it's a joke. And that's the next layer of this fruity farce, the unspoken colonial undercurrent. You see, for all their enthusiasm, French nobles are quite removed from the actual origins of pineapples. The fruit hails from South America, spread through Central America and the Caribbean well before Columbus ever stumbled into anything. It was cultivated and revered by indigenous peoples long before French chefs ever tried to glaze it in sugar. But in 18th century France, the pineapple becomes an emblem of global reach, of dominion. If you own one, grow one, or even just borrow one, you imply connections to colonial networks, shipping routes, botanical exchanges. You're signaling empire, without ever leaving your salon. A young nobleman at the table jokes about importing pineapple slaves to tend the pineries. The room titters. You resist the urge to roll your eyes. Historians debate how much the French elite understood, or chose to ignore, the human cost behind their tropical trophies. Ship logs reveal that pineapples often traveled in the same holds as enslaved people. Some believe the symbolism was lost on the nobility. Others suspect it wasn't lost at all, it was just ignored. You quietly sip your tea. It tastes faintly of cloves and something vaguely metallic. Maybe it's the spoon. Outside the glass walls, a storm begins to roll in, distant thunder, leaves rustling like silk skirts. You step away from the group and wander the rows of pineapples once more. You start to notice how strange they really are. Pineapples don't ripen once picked. They're born ready or not at all. Each one takes nearly 2 years to grow. They don't flower often, and when they do, it's like a tiny violet explosion under a spiky crown. And even then, only one fruit per plant. It's as if they want to be rare. Like they're in on the joke. One plant nearby leans at an odd angle. Its leaves curl in on themselves like it's shielding its fruit. The label reads, Louisette, planted during the Comet Week. You make a mental note not to ask. You glance over your shoulder. The other guests are still chatting about soil temperatures and light refraction as if they've all suddenly become amateur botanists. One woman fans herself with a pamphlet titled On the Virtues of Pineapple Scent in Feminine Hygiene, and you decide maybe it's time to step outside. The storm has passed. The sky is lavender. You take a deep breath. The air still smells like pineapple, coal smoke, and ambition. And you realize, you haven't even tasted the fruit yet. And at this point, you're not sure you want to. You're not sure how it's happened, but you've just agreed to attend a pineapple viewing at the estate of the Comtesse de Marigny, whose reputation for lavish eccentricity makes her less a hostess and more a performance artist in petticoats. The invitation arrived sealed with gold wax in the shape of, you guessed it, a pineapple. The card inside was perfumed, and not lightly. You smell like you've rolled through a tropical apothecary just from holding it. An evening of enlightenment, fragrance and fruit. It promises. Dress code, gilded orchard. You're not even surprised anymore. As your carriage rattles down the gravel path, the estate rises into view like a rococo hallucination. Lanterns shaped like fruit bob from tree branches. Musicians in pineapple-themed waistcoats play soft airs as you arrive. A footman in citrus-colored livery takes your cloak and mutters something about the unveiling ceremony, beginning shortly. And there it is again, that language. The ceremony. The performance. The pineapple has ascended to an object of ritual. Tonight isn't about fruit salad. It's about spectacle. Inside, the drawing room is transformed. The centerpiece is under velvet. Literally. The fruit is veiled, as though modesty laws apply. Nobles cluster around with champagne flutes, discussing its lineage. This one came from a cutting of the Dutch Queen's specimen, one man claims, as though reciting holy scripture. She wept when it flowered. The room hushes. The Countess appears in a robe embroidered with gold leaves and tiny crystal pineapples. You almost admire the commitment. Almost. She lifts the veil with dramatic slowness. And there it is, perfectly symmetrical, golden-skinned, plumed like a crown. The pineapple rests on a crystal pedestal, haloed in candlelight. A ripple of sighs goes through the crowd. No one eats it. Of course not. That would be barbaric. You're beginning to understand that in 18th century France, the pineapple is no longer food. It is performance. Property. Proof of relevance. Historians still argue whether these displays were sincerely reverent or tongue-in-cheek. Some guests left behind letters filled with glowing praise of the fruit's symmetry, color, and, frequently, its noble countenance. Others rolled their eyes in ink, describing the fruit as a sullen thing, or a very pricey hedgehog. One traveler from Naples wrote that he couldn't tell whether the French adored pineapples or just adored adoring things. It's a fair distinction. But here's where it gets juicier. Metaphorically speaking, nobles began renting pineapples. Yes, renting. A fresh pineapple was far too expensive for most people to buy outright. But you could borrow one. Display it on your dinner table, walk it through a salon, place it beside your bed like a fruity pet rock, and then return it. Untouched, unbruised, reverently unused. The London market did this too, but the French took it further. You could rent a pineapple for up to 3 days, provided you kept it in a cool room and didn't sniff it too hard. Sometimes they came with insurance policies. One baroness even hosted a pineapple procession, wherein a servant carried the fruit on a satin cushion from room to room as a string quartet followed, playing softly. At each stop, guests were encouraged to compose odes in its honor. The winning poem was pinned to the pineapple's base like a sash. And then, just like that, it would be returned to the greenhouse from whence it came, like Cinderella's carriage at midnight. But fruitier. You walk away from the main hall and wander into a smaller salon, where a group of amateur botanists, by which we mean noblemen with monocles and too much time, debate the best way to encourage pineapple docility. The current theory involves talking to them during full moons and playing harpsichord concertos in D minor. Someone else swears by feeding them beer. The room smells like damp velvet, crushed mint, and too much cologne. A tiny dog in a tutu sniffs your shoe. You sit, overwhelmed by the sheer ritualization of it all. Somehow, in the twilight of French aristocracy, pineapples have filled a void left by meaning, industry, or spiritual clarity. They've become avatars for everything the nobles lack: authenticity, effort, connection to land. And so they project all of that onto a fruit they refuse to eat. It's not just absurd, it's kind of poetic. Outside the window, fireworks begin. Yes, fireworks. For a fruit. They arc into the night sky with lazy, golden trails, then explode in elegant bursts of citrus-colored sparks. One resembles a pineapple. You sigh. Of course it does. The Countess is now taking compliments. It's simply divine, someone purrs. So symmetrical, another murmurs. eyes wet with wonder. You lean toward the fruit. You can almost smell it over the perfume and pomade, something tart, clean, and wild. It's strange to think this tropical plant has somehow survived its voyage across oceans, climates, and courtly nonsense. Maybe, in its heart, it still wants to be eaten. But it won't be. Not tonight. You linger a little longer, then slip out quietly, the smell of scorched sugar and citrus still clinging to your sleeve. And as your carriage rocks gently homeward through the dark French countryside, you close your eyes and wonder, is it really the pineapple they're obsessed with, or just the performance of longing itself? The morning light filters softly through lace curtains, warm and diffused like a whispered secret. You find yourself in a gilded bedroom somewhere near Versailles, the faint scent of orange blossom and waxed wood mingling in the air. The night's pineapple spectacle still lingers in your mind, along with a faint stickiness on your fingertips from the perfumed invitation. You stretch, feeling oddly rested, despite the evening's social tightrope walk around fruit that might as well have been a jeweled talisman. You wander over to a window and gaze out across perfectly trimmed gardens. The dew sparkles on every leaf and blade of grass, catching light like scattered diamonds. You spot the orangery in the distance, a large, elegant greenhouse built for exotic plants that are clearly meant to impress rather than feed. You wonder what secrets lie within. Because pineapples weren't the only luxury plant the French nobility collected, they surrounded themselves with other botanical rarities like vanilla orchids, cacao trees, and even cotton plants, each a living proof of their reach and refinement. These greenhouses, often called pineries, were a sort of botanical theater, a place where science, status, and spectacle collided under glass. You imagine yourself stepping into one now. The air inside is thick and warm, humid like a tropical morning. Leaves brush softly against your arms as you navigate narrow paths between dense foliage. Some of the plants look wild and untamed, others precisely trimmed like miniature sculptures. Somewhere near the back, the pineapple plants thrive, or at least pretend to. You remember what the gardener said last night about how difficult it was to keep the temperature stable during winter, and how frost was pineapple's mortal enemy. You recall that the pineapples were cultivated with a method called the pit system. Shallow trenches filled with hot manure to generate heat, covered with glass or linen during cold spells. The whole arrangement was a delicate balance between natural cycles and human interference. It was the botanical equivalent of keeping a chandelier from crashing down on your dinner guests. You sip your tea slowly, the flavor mild, with just a hint of bergamot, and you think about how, for the nobles, tending to these plants was an exercise in patience and prestige. Growing a pineapple could take nearly 2 years, and that slow pace only increased the fruit's allure. It became a symbol not only of wealth but of control over nature's rhythms, a kind of aristocratic meditation. Historians still argue whether the horticultural obsession was driven more by genuine scientific curiosity or by a desperate need to display social power. Some claim the gardens were early experiments in botany that contributed to agricultural advances. Others see them as elaborate facades masking idle extravagance. You catch the distant sound of a carriage, your cue, perhaps, to move on. But before you leave, you pause to consider another detail: the men and women who actually cared for these plants. While nobles basked in their tropical triumphs, the real work often fell to gardeners and servants whose names rarely made the history books. They wielded watering cans, adjusted the glass panels, and whispered to the plants in a language no one else understood. Some of these caretakers were trained botanists or horticultural enthusiasts, but many were simply laborers caught in a world glittering far above their reach. And here, you notice a certain irony. The fruit so prized for its rarity and sweetness depended entirely on unseen hands and laborious care. Without their toil, there would be no pineapple ceremonies, no gilded glasshouses, no whispered poems. You feel a gentle stirring of appreciation for these quiet caretakers, people who lived in the margins of aristocratic spectacle, but whose work was essential to its magic. The sun rises higher now, casting dappled light through your window. You take a final sip of your tea, savoring the calm before the day truly begins. You know the story is far from over. You step out of the garden's cool shade and find yourself wandering toward the bustling streets of Paris, where the air is a mix of fresh bread, horse sweat, and the faint tang of coal smoke. It's a far cry from the fragrant orangeries and velvet-draped salons you've been drifting through. Here, life pulses with a different kind of energy, gritty, raw, and irresistibly real. And yet, even in these crowded streets, the pineapple's influence ripples quietly through the everyday. You slip into a small, dimly lit cafe where the chatter hums like a gentle river. Patrons sip on coffee and nibble on buttered bread, eyes bright with the gossip of the day. You overhear a conversation between two merchants debating the latest pineapple shipment from the Caribbean. Too costly for most, one grumbles, swirling a thin cup of black coffee. But the nobles, they eat with their eyes, not their mouths. You nod, understanding that phrase perfectly by now. The pineapple is a luxury beyond price, a fruit more valuable as a statement than as sustenance. Curious, you inquire about how common folk regarded this curious tropical oddity. The waiter smiles knowingly and leans in. For us, the pineapple is a fairy tale fruit, something from faraway lands, wrapped in mystery. We hear stories of its sweetness but seldom taste it. You recall that pineapples arrived in Europe via the Spanish and Portuguese explorers in the 16th century, initially causing quite a stir. Back then, few could have imagined that, 2 centuries later, the fruit would become a fixture of aristocratic obsession, less as food and more as a symbol. This reminds you of a quirky little fact. In England, some wealthy families would rent pineapples not just for display but as centerpieces during grand feasts, a custom borrowed and adapted by the French. Renting meant you could parade your status without the cost of ownership, and also avoid the risk of eating the symbol itself. Imagine paying a fortune to show off a fruit you're forbidden to eat. You watch a street vendor carving a melon with quick, practiced hands, his booth bright with seasonal fruits that seem ordinary by comparison. The pineapple is a distant dream to these vendors, but its myth threads through their lives nonetheless. Historians still argue whether the popular fascination with pineapples trickled down to common folk or remained a purely elite spectacle. Some say that folk songs and plays included references to the fruit's exotic allure, while others suggest the pineapple was simply too rare and expensive to capture the imagination outside noble circles. Your thoughts drift to the role pineapples played in French cuisine at the time, or, more accurately, the lack thereof. Unlike the juicy tomatoes or rich cheeses adorning tables across the country, pineapples rarely made it beyond ornamental use. They appeared in paintings and tapestries more often than on plates. When pineapples were served, they were typically candied or turned into elaborate desserts, often overshadowed by more familiar local ingredients. There's a story of a famous Parisian chef who, upon receiving a fresh pineapple, simply used it as a garnish on a traditional roast, his way of blending old and new. You chuckle softly, imagining the bemused faces of diners wondering what exactly they were supposed to do with this strange, spiky fruit. Later, you wander into a bookshop filled with dusty tomes on botany and cooking. A thick volume catches your eye, Exotic Fruits and Their Uses. Flipping through, you find a section on pineapple recipes, a handful of carefully guarded concoctions blending spices, sugar, and citrus. The instructions read more like alchemical formulas than recipes, hinting at the fruit's mystique. It's a reminder that pineapples were both rare ingredient and decadent symbol, a perfect fit for a society fascinated with appearances and the art of subtle extravagance. As you leave the shop, the sun begins to set, casting long shadows over cobblestone streets. You realize the pineapple, though foreign and forbidden to many, has woven itself quietly into the fabric of 18th century French life, from the grandest salons to the humblest markets. And that, you think, is the true magic of the pineapple, its ability to be so much more than fruit. The evening settles softly, and you find yourself back within the walls of a grand chateau, the kind where mirrors multiply candlelight into gentle rivers of gold. You settle into a velvet armchair by the fire, the warmth curling around you like a familiar blanket. Here, the story of pineapples takes a more curious twist, a glimpse into the peculiar rituals and hidden games of the French nobility. You've heard whispers of the pineapple as a secret currency among the elite, an emblem of power traded in hushed negotiations and veiled promises. It's almost like a whispered joke. Who knew that a tropical fruit could function as a badge of honor, or a tool of social leverage? One tale sticks in your mind about a certain noblewoman who reportedly used a single pineapple as collateral for a loan. Imagine that, a fruit worth more than gold coins, enough to sway fortunes and futures. It's a reminder that, in this world, status often trumps substance. You picture the careful choreography of social gatherings, where pineapples were displayed like trophies on silver platters, their prickly exteriors gleaming under crystal chandeliers. These were no ordinary dinner parties, they were performances, delicate dances of etiquette and ambition. Guests might comment admiringly on the pineapple's size or aroma, each compliment a silent nod to the host's wealth and connections. You can almost hear the soft murmur of conversation, punctuated by polite laughter and the clinking of glasses. Interestingly, some nobles went to great lengths to procure pineapples in secret, bypassing official channels or engaging in covert trades. The pineapple's rarity fueled a small but fervent black market, where whispered deals occurred behind closed doors, often involving exotic spices or fine silks. You think about the many layers of meaning wrapped around this single fruit: luxury, secrecy, competition. It's no wonder historians still debate whether the pineapple's value lay more in its symbolic capital or in any practical culinary use. You're reminded of a quirky custom where guests might pass a pineapple around as a conversation starter, a kind of social icebreaker that signaled inclusion in an exclusive circle. Holding the fruit briefly meant you were part of the in-group, even if only for a moment. But of course, not all interactions were so benign. Some nobles reportedly kept their pineapples under lock and key, guarding them jealously from envious eyes, and occasionally from mischievous servants with sticky fingers. This secrecy even extended to pineapple recipes, which were often closely guarded family secrets. Sharing a dessert made with pineapple was a sign of immense trust and generosity, almost like revealing the recipe for an elixir of power. You smile softly at the idea of these culinary conspiracies unfolding in gilded kitchens, with chefs whispering like spies over simmering pots. Outside the grand windows, a cool breeze rustles through the leaves, and you feel the subtle thrill of being privy to these hidden worlds. The pineapple isn't just a fruit here, it's a key to understanding the peculiar rituals of a society obsessed with image, control, and the delicate art of display. As your eyelids grow heavy, you ponder the strange, prickly fruit's journey, from tropical soil to the heart of aristocratic intrigue, and the many stories it silently witnessed along the way. The early morning light filters through your window again, soft and dappled like a watercolor painting. You're back in the countryside now, in a sprawling estate far from the hustle of Parisian streets, where the whispers of court intrigue are replaced by the gentle sounds of rustling leaves and distant bird calls. Here, the pineapple takes on a new role, not just as a symbol of wealth and power, but as a botanical experiment in the evolving world of horticulture. You stroll through the gardens, the damp earth cool beneath your feet, the air heavy with the scent of damp soil and blooming flowers. You stop by a cluster of glass-covered beds, early greenhouses called pineries, where the pineapple plants grow slowly, patiently. You can almost feel the gardener's quiet pride and frustration, tending to these exotic specimens that demand constant care. It's said that the art of pineapple cultivation was one of the earliest forms of European horticultural science, blending botanical knowledge from the New World with Old World gardening techniques. The heat generated by layers of decomposing manure created the tropical conditions these plants needed, a kind of human-made jungle under glass. You imagine the gardener's hands, weathered yet gentle, adjusting the layers of straw and manure, watching for signs of frost or pests. They knew the pineapple's delicate nature intimately, and their work was a constant negotiation between nature's whims and human will. A peculiar fact comes to mind: some estates even employed pineapple nurses, gardeners who specialized in the fruit's care, becoming experts in its needs and temperament. These were respected positions, a blend of science, art, and patience. You think about how this horticultural obsession paralleled the broader Enlightenment spirit, an age where curiosity and empirical study began to challenge superstition and tradition. Pineapples, in their prickly elegance, embodied this blend of wonder and control. Historians still argue whether the cultivation of pineapples was primarily a scientific pursuit or a frivolous luxury project driven by aristocratic vanity. Some point to detailed botanical records and experiments as evidence of genuine inquiry, while others see the whole endeavor as a lavish pastime. As you wander further, you notice other exotic plants thriving nearby: vanilla orchids, cacao trees, and even coffee plants, each a botanical trophy from far-flung colonies. The estate's greenhouse is a microcosm of empire, a place where plants tell stories of exploration, conquest, and cultural exchange. You pause to touch a pineapple leaf, its rough texture a reminder of the fruit's wild origins, so different from the polished world it now inhabits. The gardeners here are the unsung heroes of this story, their knowledge passed down through generations, their labor hidden beneath layers of aristocratic grandeur. Without their care, the pineapples would remain tropical curiosities, never making their way into French noble homes. You feel a quiet reverence for this hidden world of botanical science and daily toil, a reminder that every glittering symbol has its roots in patient work and earthly soil. The sun climbs higher, warming your back as you take a deep breath of the humid greenhouse air, carrying with it the scent of possibilities, of discovery, and of a fruit that captured the imagination of an entire era. You leave the serene greenery behind and drift into a richly decorated drawing room, where the air feels thick with perfume and polished wood. Here, the pineapple becomes a fascinating centerpiece of art and decoration, less a fruit to be eaten, more a motif to be admired. You glance around at the walls adorned with tapestries and paintings, many featuring pineapples nestled among flowers or perched atop intricately carved furniture. It's almost as if the pineapple had been crowned the unofficial emblem of elegance. This ornamental obsession wasn't just limited to paintings. You notice a delicate porcelain vase shaped like a pineapple, its glaze catching the soft glow of afternoon light. Pineapple-shaped candlesticks, silver salt cellars, and embroidered table linens all echo the motif, saturating noble spaces with the fruit's image. You learn that this decorative trend drew inspiration from the pineapple's status as a symbol of hospitality and wealth, a meaning inherited from earlier European traditions where the fruit was displayed to welcome guests. It was an exotic flourish signaling generosity and refined taste. Interestingly, pineapples also appeared in architectural details. Garden gates, fountain spouts, and even roof finials bore the signature spiked crown, spreading the fruit's iconic silhouette through noble estates and urban mansions alike. You find a quirky bit of trivia about a certain Parisian cabinetmaker famed for his pineapple-inspired furniture, whose clients reportedly waited months for commissions, eager to flaunt the latest fashionable fruit. It's almost a gentle irony that while the pineapple was too rare to be eaten often, its likeness became a common decorative flourish, flooding the homes of the very people who prized exclusivity. Historians still debate how much of this decorative pineapple mania was truly about symbolism and how much was simply the joy of novelty in a world fascinated by the exotic. You sit quietly, sipping tea from a cup that bears a subtle pineapple pattern, reflecting on how the fruit's image morphed into a language of social status, silent yet unmistakable. As the room's warm glow fades into the soft evening light, you consider the pineapple's curious dual life, both a tangible rarity and an endlessly replicated symbol. You imagine the countless conversations sparked by a pineapple centerpiece, whispers of travel, empire, and fortune, all wrapped up in one spiky fruit. And as you prepare to leave, the soft clink of china and the quiet rustle of fabric remind you that sometimes, what a thing represents can be far more powerful than the thing itself. The evening deepens as you find yourself in a dimly lit chamber, walls lined with books and heavy drapes that swallow the light like a velvet embrace. This is the world of 18th-century French science and exploration, where the pineapple's journey intersects with the era's expanding horizons and thirst for knowledge. You imagine the sea voyages that brought this spiky treasure from distant Caribbean islands to the docks of France, ships groaning under the weight of crates filled with unknown fruits, spices, and curiosities. The pineapple was a prize among these goods, prized not just for its rarity but for its promise of the exotic. Natural philosophers and botanists of the time eagerly catalogued the pineapple, describing its strange appearance and sweet taste in detailed journals. You picture these scholars, quill in hand, debating the pineapple's place in the botanical order, trying to classify it in a world still discovering the natural wonders of the New World. There's a charming story about a young botanist who first described the pineapple in French scientific circles, only to be teased by colleagues for mistaking it initially for a kind of pine cone with fruit. It's a reminder that even experts can be fooled by the unfamiliar. You consider the pineapple's role as a symbol of empire, an edible trophy of conquest and exploration. It embodied the connections between the colonies and the motherland, a delicious thread tying together distant lands. But there's also a practical side to this story. The pineapple's cultivation inspired advances in greenhouse technology and horticultural science, as we touched on earlier, and it became a test subject for experiments on acclimatization and plant physiology. Historians still argue whether the scientific curiosity around pineapples was genuine or mostly a veneer to justify the extravagant spending on their cultivation and display. Some view the pineapple as a catalyst for botanical progress. Others see it as a luxury indulgence cloaked in the language of science. You imagine the salons of Paris buzzing with talk of exotic plants, where learned gentlemen and ladies debated the latest discoveries, their voices mingling with the soft clink of teacups and the rustle of silk. This atmosphere of inquiry and wonder reflects a time when knowledge and luxury were tightly intertwined, and the pineapple was at the heart of this fascinating mix. As the night deepens, you feel the hum of curiosity and ambition that drove both empire-building and scientific discovery, all linked by this prickly, sweet fruit. You awaken in the soft glow of candlelight filtering through lace curtains, transported to a bustling French kitchen filled with the aromas of roasting meats and delicate spices. This is where the pineapple's role shifts once again, from symbol and specimen to ingredient and culinary experiment. You watch as cooks meticulously prepare the exotic fruit, peeling back its tough skin with practiced hands, revealing the juicy treasure inside. It's said that the pineapple's sweet and tart flavor was a revelation to 18th-century palates, mixing seamlessly with the rich, buttery sauces favored by the nobility. You can almost hear the clatter of copper pots and the steady chopping of knives. The kitchen, a symphony of sounds and smells. Recipes for pineapple desserts, tarts, and preserves circulated among aristocratic households, though often guarded like precious secrets. One curious tidbit is that some chefs attempted to create pineapple-infused wines, blending the fruit with local grapes in the hopes of capturing the tropics in a bottle. These experiments met with mixed reviews. Some praised the novelty, while others found the flavors puzzling or even off-putting. You smile at the image of a chef nervously presenting a pineapple dish at a lavish dinner party, wondering if it would impress or bewilder the guests. The pineapple's culinary journey was not without challenges. Transporting the fruit intact from ship to table required careful timing and preservation methods. Often, by the time it reached a feast, the pineapple was slightly overripe, adding a hint of fermentation to the flavor. Historians still debate how much pineapples truly influenced French cuisine versus serving as a decorative centerpiece. Was the fruit enjoyed for its taste, or was it primarily an edible status symbol? Despite these questions, the pineapple found its way into recipes that balanced indulgence with exotic flair, blending European culinary traditions with the new tastes of the colonies. You imagine the conversations at those dinner tables, guests speculating about the fruit's origins, praising the chef's skill, or simply savoring the sweet, juicy bite that was as much a story as a dessert. As the kitchen settles into quiet, the lingering scent of caramelized pineapple and spices wraps around you, a final sensory thread linking the fruit to the lives and tastes of an era long past. You feel the soft rhythm of daily life pulsing beneath the grandeur, where even a pineapple could tell tales of travel, taste, and transformation. You find yourself in a softly lit ballroom, filled with swirling silk gowns and the quiet murmur of polite conversation, where the pineapple's influence stretches beyond gardens and kitchens into the subtle art of social display. Imagine yourself moving gracefully through this glittering scene, noticing how pineapples feature prominently not only on plates but as thematic decorations for grand parties and gatherings. The fruit has become a motif signaling refinement and exclusivity, a secret handshake among the aristocracy. You overhear whispers about the elaborate pineapple balls, events centered around the exotic fruit, where guests competed in displaying their knowledge and appreciation of the pineapple through stories, poems, and even pineapple-inspired dances. Some noble hosts went as far as commissioning entire banquets designed around the fruit, from pineapple-flavored wines to centerpieces carved from sugar in the shape of the spiky fruit. The pineapple was less food and more spectacle, a delicious form of social currency. A quirky anecdote involves a famously eccentric duke who kept a live pineapple plant on display during soirees, proudly pointing it out to guests as both a horticultural marvel and a conversation starter. His guests reportedly admired the fruit but also questioned whether he might be using it to mask less exciting topics. You think about how the pineapple's presence in social rituals reflected a deeper desire among the nobility to project sophistication and global awareness, a subtle way of saying, "Look what the empire has brought us." Historians still debate whether these pineapple-themed entertainments were truly enjoyed or mostly endured as necessary social performances. Was the fruit a genuine pleasure or a clever prop in the theater of aristocratic life? As the music swells and the dance floor fills, you feel the pineapple's symbolic power at work, turning simple gatherings into displays of wealth and cultural capital. You reflect on how this use of the pineapple in social settings parallels modern-day trends where luxury items become shorthand for status and taste. The soft rustle of gowns and polite laughter fade into a gentle hum as the ballroom dims, leaving you with a lingering sense of a fruit that was much more than a dessert. It was a cultural phenomenon. You realize that behind the spiky exterior lay layers of meaning, performance, and human connection, all wrapped in the delicate glow of candlelight and whispered conversations. You settle into a quiet study, the crackle of a fireplace blending with the soft rustling of parchment as you explore the pineapple's surprising role in fashion and personal adornment during the 18th century. Here, the fruit's influence extends beyond the table and garden, weaving itself into the very fabric of noble life. Imagine delicate lace collars embroidered with tiny pineapple motifs, silk ribbons printed with the fruit's signature pattern, and jewelry that mimics its spiky elegance. Gold pendants shaped like pineapples, adorned with tiny gemstones that sparkle under soft candlelight. The pineapple's image was even woven into fabrics used for gowns and waistcoats, turning clothing into a subtle yet unmistakable statement of status and taste. Wearing pineapple-inspired fashion was like carrying a little piece of the exotic with you, a wearable emblem of prestige. You learn about an intriguing case of a famous French couturier who launched a pineapple collection, causing a mild sensation at court. His clients clamored for pineapple-shaped buttons, hats adorned with artificial pineapples, and fans painted with the fruit's image. On a lighter note, there's a tale of a noblewoman who once wore a hat so extravagantly decorated with pineapple motifs that it nearly caused a minor traffic jam in the palace corridors, proof that even the fruit could inspire fashion faux pas. Historians still debate how much of this pineapple fashion trend was driven by genuine admiration for the fruit and how much was a playful nod to its status as a rare and luxurious curiosity. Some argue it was a tongue-in-cheek way for nobles to flaunt wealth without being too obvious. The pineapple's presence in fashion also echoes its broader cultural role as a bridge between nature and artifice, a natural wonder transformed into crafted beauty. You imagine yourself slowly tracing the embroidered patterns on a gown, feeling the raised threads and imagining the artisan's careful work, all to celebrate a fruit so beloved yet so fleeting. As the fire's warmth softens, you sense how the pineapple's delicate beauty touched every aspect of noble life, from the garden to the grand ball, right down to the clothes they wore. It's a reminder that in 18th century France, even the smallest detail, like a pineapple motif, could carry the weight of social meaning and personal expression. You breathe in the quiet comfort of this study, surrounded by silk and flame light, feeling the subtle but unmistakable presence of the pineapple woven through history. You drift into the quiet corners of French noble estates, where the pineapple's story shifts toward its legacy and the slow fading of its 18th century obsession. The grand hoarding, the cultivation mania, and the symbolic extravagance gradually give way to quieter reflections on what the fruit truly represented. You sense the slow change in taste and cultural values as the centuries turn. New fruits arrive, new fashions emerge, and the pineapple's star dims but never fully fades. Its legacy lingers in the architecture, the gardens, and the stories whispered in old libraries. You contemplate how the pineapple's journey mirrors the ebb and flow of history itself, a symbol that once stood at the center of wealth and power, now a gentle reminder of the past's layered complexities. You recall the debates among historians about whether the pineapple craze was a frivolous indulgence or a meaningful expression of cultural identity and empire. Perhaps it was both, a delicious paradox wrapped in spiky skin. As you walk through the fading echoes of candlelit halls and overgrown gardens, you feel the pineapple spirit as a bridge between worlds, nature and culture, past and present, ordinary life and extraordinary aspiration. The fruit's image still appears occasionally, like a ghost of elegance, reminding us that history often lives in the small, unexpected details. You think of all the hands that touched pineapples, from Caribbean farmers to French gardeners, chefs, and nobles, each adding a layer to its rich story. The soft sounds of a distant fountain and the rustling of leaves accompany your thoughts, as if the past itself sighs with contentment. You take a deep breath, savoring the last sweetness of this journey through time and taste, Knowing the pineapple's tale is a quiet testament to human curiosity, desire, and creativity. The night settles fully around you, gentle and warm, as you prepare to leave this world behind, carrying the pineapple's whispered stories with you into your dreams. Word count: 1090. Wind down. Now, as the story drifts to a close, you feel the weight of time soften, the sharp edges of history smoothing into gentle hills. Imagine yourself reclining in a soft chair, the faint scent of fruit and wood mingling in the air. The pineapple's spiny silhouette fades slowly, like a candle burning low, its warmth lingering in the quiet corners of your mind. There's no rush here, only the slow unfolding of stories shared between centuries. You breathe deeply, letting the peaceful rhythms of the past cradle you like a soft blanket. The world outside your window grows still, and you drift further into calm, carrying with you the subtle sweetness of distant gardens and whispered secrets. Sleep comes gently now, wrapped in the knowledge that history lives not only in grand events but in the delicate details, like the humble pineapple, quietly woven through the lives of those who came before. Sweet dreams.